Senpai! Unbelievable!
Hey guys, Super Pixel Girl here. So, I'm sure most of you have heard about Tales of Symphonia, and what an excellent game it is, probably the best in the Tales series. But back in... when was this made? Back in 2001, my sister and I had no idea what a Tales game was, but what we did know is that a whole lot of games with anime characters on it like this, posed ever so perfectly, those games oftentimes really sucked. But I went to, I think it was either, it must have been a Blockbuster, which is funny to think back, and was looking at the game section and I saw this and I picked it up and I showed my sister and I knew what she was thinking because I was thinking the same thing. This game is probably gonna suck because most of the games we tried that looked kind of cool but were anime in nature sucked. But I was like, well, let's give it a try. We have nothing else we're doing that night. Why don't we just give this game a try? Never had played a Tales game in our life. So we rented it. And we ended up loving it. We loved it. But the fact still remains that Tales of Symphonia has a lot of anime tropes. In fact, it probably is the most tropey game out there. And usually I hate anime tropes because they're just so overdone.
You're going down. If I fight, they will know I'm superhuman. If I do not fight, everyone will die! Senpai! Unbelievable!
But this game is filled with tropes, but it's oh so right. It's oh so right. But this game isn't necessarily about fangirling over Tales of Symphonia, but it does deserve that video. This is going to be talking about why Tales of Symphonia succeeds despite the anime tropes. Let's begin. Tales of Symphonia is one of my all-time favorite RPGs thanks to its story and characters, but at first glance, it can be hard to see why. After all, it seems to be brimming with anime tropes. And haven't we seen this story premise before? If you really dig into Tales of Symphonia, you'll see that while it does use familiar tropes, it also deconstructs and subverts them. Let's take a look. Starting with one of the most apparent from the game's beginning, the heroic self-sacrifice of the Chosen One. We'll be spoiling many Tales of Symphonia plot points here, so turn back now if you want to remain spoiler-free. Colette is the Chosen, a girl named by an angel as the savior that will regenerate the world. She has been raised all her life knowing that one day she will go on a journey and sacrifice her own life to awaken the goddess Martel and save the world. While the main character doesn't know this is the intended result of the journey, Colette does, and she embraces it, doing everything she can to hide her own doubts and suffering for the sake of her friend. This pure-hearted martyr character is nothing new, except Tales of Symphonia doesn't let that stand. Colette's insistence upon hiding her pain is repeatedly shown to be a bad thing. The infamous coffee scene, in which Lloyd lies about whether his coffee is hot or cold, in order to prove that Colette has lost her sense of touch, is a very serious scene in context, even if it's remembered for its humor now. When the party learns that Colette is meant to sacrifice herself, they reject this option, but Colette herself continues to hide her struggling. Much of the character development over the course of this game comes from shattering this trope. Colette gains a sense of self-worth and learns to value all life, including her own. Much of this is due to Colette's best friend and main protagonist of the game, Lloyd Irving. So let's move on to him next. Lloyd is another easily recognized archetype. He's the hero who never gives up, who believes in a pure world where good always triumphs over evil. Now, Tales of Symphonia is generally an optimistic game, but that doesn't mean this trope gets to stand intact. The world is not filled with clear-cut morality, where the good guys and bad guys are easily distinguished. It gets into serious discussions of how one group's villain can be another group's savior, and Lloyd learns there are many more shades of gray than he previously thought. And he never gives up. Well, unless he's wrong. And that's kind of the main distinction between him and the bad guy. Mythos, basically the antagonist of the game, and Lloyd are actually quite similar. In some ways, Mythos fits the determined hero trope more closely, just taken all the way to its grim conclusion. The biggest difference between them is that Lloyd knows when to admit he was wrong. While I could go on and on about what makes Mythos stand out as a villain, which I did already with Cannot Be Tamed, let's step away from the major cast to look at a party member who really highlights the way Tales of Symphonia plays with its tropes, Zelos Wilder. I'll admit that when I played Tales of Symphonia, Zelos was probably one of my least favorite party members. Of all the familiar tropes in the game, he appeared to be one of the most common. While he prances into the story with awestruck fans behind him, an inflated opinion of himself, and a flirtatious comment or innuendo for every single female character he meets, you might think you've seen this character in 1,000 different games already. In fact, you can even finish the game without ever seeing Zelos as more than a narcissistic ladies' man. But just like Mythos is an unexpected mirror of Lloyd, Zelos is another unexpected mirror of Colette. Colette's cheerful acceptance of her expected sacrifice is a mask so her friends don't see her pain, and Zelos' carefree attitude is a mask meant to protect himself. If you can get him to lower this mask, you'll learn that he is actually suffering deeply. As a result, Zelos is filled with secret self-loathing and will actually commit suicide by forcing the party to kill him in one of the game's branching paths. Pretty dark for a character who appears so shallow on the surface. In short, Tales of Symphonia may have some familiar anime tropes, but it examines and subverts them in interesting ways. Colette, Lloyd, Mythos, Zelos are just some examples of how Tales of Symphonia tells an excellent story because of its tropes and how it uses them.